Hello, good evening and welcome to Biz First Review 360, your weekly roundup of the top business news and developments impacting the Sri Lankan economy. I'm Nadim Majid. This week has been very eventful for Sri Lanka. Finally, the long-awaited local government amendment bill has been adopted by Parliament, signed and certified by the Speaker, and we're all waiting now to see when the local government elections will be held. Also this week, President Maithripala Sirisena dismissed speculation of cracks within the coalition government and insisted that the unity government will continue until its full term ends in 2020. He also expressed regret at delays in the introduction of the National Audit Bill. Well, that's a quick recap of the top stories this week. Let's take a look at some stories that made headlines in the business sector.
Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, addressing an international maritime forum in Colombo, said Sri Lanka is pushing for an international agreement that guarantees the freedom of navigation in the Indian Ocean as major powers build up naval capabilities in the region.
It is evident that most of the world's armed conflicts are presently located in the Indian Ocean region. The waters of the Indian Ocean are also home to continually evolving strategic developments, including the rise of regional powers with nuclear capabilities, conflicts in the Gulf, unrest in Iraq and Afghanistan, rise of violent extremism, growing incidents of piracy in and around the Horn of Africa loom over our region. Given the rising conflicts in the Middle East and West Asia, world's major powers have deployed substantial military forces in that part of the Indian Ocean region. In our view, the vital sea lanes of communication in the Indian Ocean that fuels the global economy needs to be open for all and must be used for mutual benefits in a sustainable manner. It is essential to maintain peace and stability in the Indian Ocean region, which ensures the right of all states to freedom of navigation and overflight. That unhindered lawful maritime commerce are conducted in keeping with current international laws and regulations.
Premier Wickremesinghe said regional security concerns are not fully addressed by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Wickremesinghe told an international forum on the Indian Ocean in Colombo.
As you would be aware, there are 10 critical choke points in the Indian Ocean that remain vulnerable to air and maritime encounters and possible terrorist attacks by non-state actors. Given the rising conflicts in the Middle East and West Asia, world's major powers have deployed substantial military force in the Indian region. These traditional and modern security concerns are yet to be addressed internationally. Articles 34 to 56 of UNCLOS are insufficient to deal with these concerns that are related to freedom of navigation in the Indian Ocean. Therefore, Sri Lanka intends working with all our partners in creating a shared vision for economic and security engagement. We remain convinced that a code of conduct that ensures the freedom of navigation in our ocean will be an essential component of this vision. In this regard, as I mentioned earlier, Sri Lanka will soon commence exploratory discussions on convening a meeting to deliberate on a stable legal order on freedom of navigation and overflight in the Indian Ocean.
Moody's Investors Service says that the outlook for Sri Lanka's banking system is negative, with both asset quality and profitability under pressure. Srikant Wadlamani, a Moody's Vice President and Senior Credit Officer, says the economy will only see a modest growth rebound as the government's fiscal constraints continue to limit public investment and private spending despite stronger goods and services exports. Moody's conclusions are contained in just released Banking System Outlook Sri Lanka, Macroeconomics Risks from the weak fiscal position and deteriorating bank asset quality underpin negative outlook. Moody's outlook assesses 5 key factors: operating environment, stable; asset risk in capital, deteriorating, stable; profitability and efficiency, deteriorating; funding and liquidity, stable; and government support, deteriorating. The Reuters news agency reported that Sri Lanka will cut government expenditure to stick to its 2017 budget deficit target of 4.6% of gross domestic product or GDP and compensate for a fall in revenue, a top bureaucrat in the finance ministry said last Thursday. On the sidelines of a meeting in Colombo, Finance Secretary R.H.S. Samaratunga had told Reuters, and I quote, "We will arrange and cut some expenditure to meet the deficit target," unquote. Sri Lanka will fall short of its 2017 revenue target because of delays in adopting budget proposals.
Stay tuned to Biz First Review 360. We have a conversation with a very interesting sci-fi author coming up right after this break. Is there a global market for English literature from Sri Lanka? Well, our guest this evening certainly thinks so. He's setting benchmarks and blazing a trail for science fiction writers around the world. He is Yudhanjaya Vijayratne. We have very special guests joining us in the studio this evening. This, the slow sad suicide of Rohan Vijayratne, a fictional character, was his first foray, and this Numbercast, much thicker volume, his sophomore effort. He's Yudhanjaya Vijayratne. We're going to be talking about the book Numbercast and also the global market for Sri Lankan literature. Yudhanjaya, thank you very much for coming on.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Let me start off with Numbercast. What inspired you to take on this book?
Right, so what happened was I was at a startup event. I was covering these all sorts of startup events for ReadMe. I was sitting there and I was watching entrepreneurs and investors talking to one another. And every so often you'd get one person from one of these tribes meeting another person, and they would sort of immediately size each other up. They will ask, Machang, where did you go to school? You must have known this and this person. And sort of sizing up the power hierarchy, trying to understand whether the person that they had just met was more or less important than them. I remember thinking it would have been a lot easier if they all had numbers on their heads, telling the person exactly how important they were. And fast forward that a little bit, I ended up working on some case studies, which I can't talk about at the moment, but they involved companies that used huge amounts of human data to predict not just simple things like whether you're good enough to take a loan, but also vastly more complex instruments like credit risk modeling. And I realized that we live in something like George Orwell's wet dream right now. That man in 1984 essentially dreamed about a police state that had cameras in every corner. We, on the other hand, we Instagram where we go to. We tag people in our statuses every time.
Willingly giving
exactly
marketers.
So we supply all of this data, and it so happens that in 2012, there was this article, a whole series of articles talking about a guy called Kozinski, who in 2012 created a model using Facebook, a prediction model, that with enough Facebook likes could actually be more accurate than your own partner, than your own parents at predicting what you will like and do next. So I thought, well, we have all this data, and there is this idea. What if I put the two of them together? That was how that was born.
The book has been called prophetic. Do you believe that it is prophecy?
Well, at the back there is a disclaimer. I have written it saying this is not intended as a work of prophecy. It is simply an extrapolation of trends that are very present today. Because if you look at everything from Facebook to Google, you have a clear case of quantification where humans are basically turned into little numbers for processing. And that makes the world easier. That gives us access to all these information services that we count as so integral to our lives. So I don't really think of this as prophetic. Actually, China is already doing this. In 2012, The Independent ran an article where they talked about this thing called Sesame Credit, which the Chinese state actually is apparently introducing, something that tracks your economic score as well as your political leanings and puts them together on one score and says, this is this person's worth. And apparently, during an experiment, they had tied travel privileges to this score. And a whole bunch of people had just been stranded in Beijing, unable to go back and forth. So I think it's reality more than prophecy.
So it's not science fiction, it's science then?
It is science, yes, exactly. And
Yudhanjay, we've seen a lot of Sri Lankan writers are quite prolific. They get into a number of social issues, societal issues, etc., etc. Sci-fi, the genre of sci-fi, is not very prominent among
Sadly
Sri
true.
Lankan writers. How do you get into science fiction?
Well, I've always loved sci-fi, and that is something that I've always grown up reading. And so when it was time for me to write something, I was running this blog called Icarus Wept. There were like a couple of 100,000 people reading that thing. But I wanted to do something more than just a 2,000-word blog post every week. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write a book. And what am I going to write? It was either fantasy or sci-fi, because these are genres where you can have politics, you can have religion, you can touch on race discord, and you can still have dragons, right? So it was either that, either fantasy or sci-fi, and the die roll came into sci-fi. It was as simple as that. And I will at some point also write fantasy.
It's good to know that you're looking at writing into the future as well. Numbercast has done quite well on online, specifically on Amazon. You're on the top 10 hard sci-fi list. So you're breaking through barriers, going global. What has the reception been like for Numbercast?
Well, it was actually fantastic. So as an indie author, as a Sri Lankan, as a unknown Sri Lankan, writing science fiction in English, which is in Sri Lanka niche of a niche of a niche, never really expected any kind of reception. But instead it ended up on Huffington Post. Several sites selected it as their August hottest picks, and I was quite surprised to see Numbercast listed there with heavyweight books from very traditional publishers. It got to Amazon's bestseller charts in cyberpunk, #1 in cyberpunk, #1 in hard sci-fi. For a brief while, these charts updated hourly, so I stayed on there for like a couple of days. I was very happy. There's this one moment where I broke the top 100 in hard sci-fi, and there was Isaac Asimov's Foundation, and there was Numbercast, and there was William Gibson. So I was screenshotting like mad because I figured this would never happen. So the reception online has been fantastic. Reception elsewhere has actually been fantastic. 80% of all people who have bought the book have been from the United States. A smaller portion from Germany, France, and Japan. So I can honestly say it's found some international legs.
What about domestically?
Domestically, there has been a tidal wave of support. I do not estimate a lot of book sales domestically, but there has, don't get me wrong, like the local community, at least the social circles that I orbit in, have been fantastically supportive. So they've helped greatly in getting the word out there, in securing press. Actually, even the two of us, we had this conversation through Facebook and through our social circles and so on. The book is arguably more popular in the US than here,
Okay.
but there still seems to be a presence as well.
Let me ask you, any marketing tricks that you tried out with getting Numbercast out there, with, setting it up for success?
Well, the first marketing trick is actually right there. The Slow Sad Suicide, which I didn't intend as a marketing trick. It was just a short story that I wrote. But then what I did was, when I realized that I needed an audience, and again, unknown author from Sri Lanka, no audience. So I gave this book out free to 1,000 people, and I said, I shall give this book to you free. Give me your email address. And when the time came when I had Numbercast ready, I emailed everyone and said, hey, I have a book you might like. You like Rohan, right? How about this? And that worked out. And also my social media, I've been experimenting with Numbercast has been in the works for 2 years now. And throughout that process, I've been writing about it. Because when I started, I had no idea how to write a novel. So I sort of use my social media as an online diary of sorts as well. And there's a tremendous base of people who are waiting for that book to come out. Because by the time I didn't do a physical launch. I went to work one morning, I put up a Facebook status saying, hey guys, it's here. And about 300 to 400 people immediately jumped on and said, I want the book.
All right. When can we expect the next sci-fi masterpiece from Yudhanjay Vijayaratne?
Well, I have been invited on board an anthology of a whole bunch of Wall Street Journal / USA Today best-selling sci-fi authors. They do this thing called the Expanding Universe. They're doing it for the 3rd year, and the guy who's running the anthology, the editor, read my work and called me up and said, hey, would you like to write a story? So that was what I did this month. That's done and sent. It will be out in print in November. I'm also working on a novel. It's set in post-apocalyptic Colombo. All the adults are dead. There's only children. It's very Lord of the Flies. And you have the children of the Taj, the sons of the Cinnamon Grand, all of these little kids clustering in the ruins of empty hotels and trying to figure out who made this world.
Yudhanjay, that's a very interesting premise. I can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
Numbercast, if you want to be entertained while being given a reality check, I suggest you go out and get it. Thanks again, Yudhanjay, for
Thank you
coming on
very
the show.
much for having me.
We'll be right back after this short commercial break. On the other side, the blue economy, challenges and opportunities for Sri Lanka. Welcome back to the program. It's been said that the wars of the future will be fought over water. The oceans are critical to sustaining Earth's life support systems and the billions of people who are dependent on oceans for livelihood, food security and economic development. In this segment, we look at the potential for the blue economy of Sri Lanka.
Is not only for economic activity. Sri Lanka needs to work for economic activity because our contribution to the national GDP is less than 2.5% and there's a lot of poverty in our country. So we need to use the oceans to make it a maritime, shipping and a logistics hub. I don't want to move away from that fact. But at the same time, there are a lot of young people who must understand, being an island, we need to look after it, its environment. We are behind in many ways in terms of adapting to global standards. We need to bring those standards into our blue economy to manage it, because we need to get the resources, energy, transport, trade, food and tourism that is connected with the blue economy to help us alleviate out of poverty as well. So it's about managing the economy right and getting the message across that whatever you resource from the oceans have to be given back to it so that we sustain the growth of it.
Increases in seaborne shipping, in shipping that are economically beneficial but could have adverse implications for whale conservation and related tourism. So we need to recognise when we consider blue economy issues that part of it is an acknowledgement that increased growth must come with an increased commitment to sustainable development.
Clearly, it is but natural that India's role as the key pivot in the Indian Ocean region is a given, not only geographically, but by virtue of a shared historical and cultural heritage that binds us all across these waters. Our vision for the Indian Ocean region, therefore, is to preserve its organic unity while advancing cooperation. We will use our capabilities for the collective well-being and the mutual benefit of our maritime neighbours and island states in building their capabilities as we envisage the Indian Ocean as an engine for growth and prosperity in our region and beyond. It is of utmost importance that these waters remain safe and secure. We consider it an imperative that those who live in this region bear the primary responsibility for the peace, stability and prosperity of the Indian Ocean.
Well, for Australia, as the island continent, our marine resources play an integral part in our economic and security outlook. Our maritime territories, at 10 million square kilometres, are a third larger than the size of the Australian mainland. So you would all know that the Australian mainland is a very substantial territory, but our ocean territories are a third larger than that. More than 85% of the Australian population lives within 50 kilometres of the sea. Now, according to the Australian Institute of Marine Science, our ocean territories contribute close to $50 billion Australian dollars per year to our economy through industries such as tourism, offshore oil and gas, aquaculture, fishing and shipping. And this figure, this $50 billion a year, has more than doubled in the last 2 decades, and we expect by 2025 that the economic contribution to Australia of the blue economy will be closer to $1 billion Australian dollars a year. So this is a very substantial part of Australia's national economy.
The challenge before us is to ensure intra-ocean trade and investment, and the sustainable harnessing of the wealth of the seas, including food, medicines, and clean energy. Friends, our related aspect is the emergence of the blue economy as a promising new pillar of prosperity in the region, with immense economic and employment potential. We are already engaging our neighbors in blue economy initiatives, particularly in the areas of marine biotechnology, exploration and sustainable exploitation of ocean mineral resources, sustainable fishing practices, and harnessing of ocean energy. In India, we are implementing targeted programs for re-energizing economic activity in our islands and our coastal areas. There is also a renewed focus on strengthening marine research, developing eco-friendly marine industrial technologies, promoting sustainable fisheries, and ensuring the protection of the maritime environment.
Minerals and energy development, important. We know Sri Lanka has LNG reserves in the Mannar Basin, and that could become a significant contributor to the economy through the blue economy in years to come. Tourism too. Obviously Sri Lanka has enormous potential to develop its maritime tourism resources with activities such as whale watching, recreational fishing and water sports. Now these various economic aspects of the blue economy are important, but it would be naive to separate them from broader geopolitical consequences. As the world becomes more dependent on maritime resources, competition for influence, competition for resources will increase, and threats emerging from the maritime domain will grow. Sri Lanka has an enviable geostrategic position to make the most of the opportunities. The government, Prime Minister Wickremesinghe and others in government, talk rightly about the aspiration to build Sri Lanka into a hub in the Indian Ocean region. I think that's a very laudable aspiration, and it chimes perfectly with the recognition of the contribution that the oceans can make to Sri Lanka's growth.
Tonight on Trending Today, is canal transportation a viable option in Sri Lanka?
The first phase of a passenger boat service is to kick off early next year. The Sri Lanka Land Reclamation and Development Corporation said that the first phase of the proposed passenger boat service around canals in Colombo will be implemented from the 1st of January 2018. The program is being initiated with the aim of reducing traffic congestion. The boat service between Diyata Uyana and Vallavatta, which is still at testing level, will be utilized for passenger transportation under the first phase of the project.
And that's a wrap of tonight's program. We'll see you again, same time, same place next week. Don't forget to look us up on Facebook. You'll find us at BizFirst Review 360. I'm Nadim Majid. Good night and good luck.